This wasn't shade, this wasn't criticism, this was exposure.
In the end, I was required to apologize for disbelieving Meghan Markle, who I don't believe. And I would say to Meghan Markle, look, sit down with me, with your husband, for an equally long interview to the one you gave Oprah Winfrey.
And you're not going to tell me who had the conversation?
I think that would be very damaging to them.
Okay.
Compartmentalized
They were
conversations.
concerned that if he were too brown, that would be a problem. Are you saying that?
This wasn't shade, this was exposure. Piers Morgan voiced what executives, royal insiders, and gossip circles have been muttering for years. The moment those words hit the air, something shifted. Not quietly, not subtly. It felt like a dam breaking. For years, whispers had floated through boardrooms, palace corridors, and Hollywood dinners, carefully muted, politely ignored. And then suddenly, one man said them out loud. On television! Without blinking. And once spoken, they couldn't be pulled back.
Why do you keep your royal titles? Why do you keep calling yourselves the Duke and Duchess of Sussex? Why? Why would you do that if it's not just to make millions and millions of dollars?
The entertainment world is still reeling after Piers Morgan dropped what insiders are calling the most devastating takedown of Meghan Markle's career ambitions in recent memory. Morgan didn't just throw shade at the Duchess of Sussex, he obliterated her entire public persona in front of the world. Sources close to Meghan report that she was pacing her sprawling Montecito mansion like a caged lioness, her jaw tight and her temper simmering as the reality of public humiliation set in. Behind the gates of Montecito, the fantasy cracked. The mansion wasn't peaceful anymore, it wasn't aspirational, it was frantic. Phones buzzing, curtains drawn. A woman pacing the floors replaying the same moment again and again, realizing that the narrative she'd guarded so fiercely was slipping out of her hands. Because this time, the audience wasn't buying it, and Morgan wasn't finished.
Family that they had deserted. The most incendiary claim was that members of the royal family had raised, quotes, concerns in multiple conversations about what skin colour baby Archie's skin would be.
Piers Morgan didn't just stop at mocking Meghan's Netflix ambitions. He resurrected her most infamous claims from the Oprah interview and tore them to shreds. Sources confirm that his segment on the alleged secret garden wedding performed by the Archbishop of Canterbury sent shockwaves through both Hollywood and royal circles. That story. The one that once played like a fairy tale confession. The one delivered under soft lighting and sympathetic nods. Dragged back into daylight and examined line by line.
Do it is frankly nauseating.
I mean, if overwhelmingly the palace is popular in the UK and Meghan is not popular, it's reported that she made a phone call to your boss at ITV. What did she say to your boss as it related to you?
According to Morgan, such a ceremony would have been illegal, an absolute fabrication. And he didn't hold back in highlighting the absurdity. Yeah, old Princess Pinocchio is off on a good one here, he declared, using a nickname that palace insiders now reportedly whisper in private corridors, barely stifling laughter. The audience in the studio reportedly gasped as if collectively realizing they were witnessing the public dismantling of a royal narrative. That gasp wasn't shock, it was recognition. A moment when people realized they'd accepted a story without asking the simplest question, could this even be true? And once doubt entered the room, it spread.
Concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
What?
Morgan meticulously questioned the credibility of Meghan's entire Oprah story, framing it as a deliberate attempt to manipulate public perception. He dissected claims about mental health struggles, racism allegations, and supposed financial cutoffs, arguing that these revelations were less confessions and more calculated attacks on the monarchy. The illusion cracked wider. The sacred interview, once untouchable, was now under forensic light. And backstage, the fallout was immediate. Phones rang, advisors scrambled, damage control went into overdrive. Because once credibility starts bleeding, it doesn't stop easily. Hollywood was watching, and Hollywood remembers everything. Executives who once smiled politely were suddenly quiet. Meetings that used to feel warm turned cautious. Projects that once sounded exciting now felt risky, because perception had shifted from bold truth teller to calculated narrator. And when perception changes, doors first closed softly, then permanently. Social media followed next, not with outrage, with mockery. That's when you know the tide has turned. When disbelief becomes entertainment. The nickname stuck. Princess Pinocchio. Not just an insult, a symbol. A shorthand for a widening gap between what was said and what could be proven. And then came the Netflix whispers. Supposed comebacks. Carefully framed personal projects. Behind the scenes, insiders weren't impressed. They weren't inspired. They were exhausted. Meetings dragged, control issues surfaced, professional lines blurred, and patience wore thin. What was meant to be a reinvention began to look like self-indulgence wrapped in prestige branding. Even casual appearances became disasters. Dodgers Stadium, cameras everywhere, body language analyzed frame by frame, one bouncing with forced enthusiasm, the other frozen, disconnected. Two people in the same box yet worlds apart. The internet noticed, and it didn't forget. Then came the social missteps. Elite parties, high-profile funerals, carefully worded tributes, absences that spoke louder than presence, statements that felt rehearsed rather than real. Hollywood insiders whispered about chaos, about awkwardness, about moments that made rooms uncomfortable. Invitations quietly stopped coming, and still silence from Montecito. But silence doesn't erase questions, it amplifies them. Old records resurfaced, interviews replayed, dates cross-checked, timelines examined. What once felt polished now felt edited, too edited. Not unusual in Hollywood until royalty enters the frame. Because when your life intersects with documented history, details matter. Every number, every date, every version. And once those inconsistencies surfaced, there was no glossy interview that could bury them again. Sources whispered about tears, about fury, about disbelief that old stories were clawing back into relevance at the worst possible moment. Because timing is everything. And this came when goodwill was already thin. The public mood hardened, polls dipped, fans hesitated, skeptics felt vindicated. The woman once framed as unstoppable now appeared trapped inside her own carefully constructed image, fighting to control a story that no longer obeyed. Behind closed doors, tension reportedly thickened, ambition clashed with reality, validation chased relevance. And Montecito stopped feeling like an escape, it became a pressure cooker. And now, here, a narrative unraveling in real time. A brand wobbling under scrutiny. A public no longer willing to suspend disbelief. This isn't about one interview. It's about accumulation. Years of control, curation, and calculation colliding with a public that finally started asking questions. And once that happens, once people stop nodding and start noticing, the fall doesn't come with a scream. It comes with laughter, with skepticism, with silence where applause used to be. And the most dangerous part, the world isn't angry anymore. It's watching. And that watching, that quiet, almost amused watching, is what insiders say is terrifying inside Montecito right now. Because anger can be managed, outrage can be spun, even hate can be monetized. But indifference is career death. Sources whisper that Meghan knows it. That's why the pacing hasn't stopped. That's why the calls keep coming. PR teams, media consultants, image doctors, all being asked the same question in different ways. How do we flip this back? How do we regain control when control itself is now the accusation? The problem is the public has learned the pattern. Every time a project stalls, a new narrative appears. Every time criticism builds, a personal revelation follows. Every time silence is needed, spectacle arrives instead. And people are tired. Hollywood insiders reportedly say the same thing behind closed doors, not with malice, but with exhaustion. Meetings feel heavy, conversations feel rehearsed. Collaboration feels impossible when every detail must serve a personal storyline rather than the work itself. One executive allegedly described it as working inside someone else's documentary. And that's the core issue now. Everything feels performative. Even grief, even charity, even silence. That's why moments like the Jane Goodall Memorial cut so deeply. Because the contrast was brutal. World leaders showed up quietly. Celebrities attended without cameras. And the Sussexes issued a statement rich in intimacy but empty of presence. To critics, it felt less like mourning and more like messaging. And once that suspicion takes hold that emotion itself is being curated, there's no easy way back. Social media has already moved on from outrage to parody. Memes travel faster than explanations, clips are remixed, expressions slowed down, gestures replayed. The internet doesn't need proof, it needs patterns. And the pattern, many now say, is unmistakable. Inside Hollywood, whispers are no longer whispers. Agents warn clients off. Studios hesitate, brands pause. Not because of one scandal, but because unpredictability has become the brand. One wrong move can sink an entire project. And right now, Meghan Markle is perceived as the wrong move. Prince Harry, once expected to soften the image, is now seen as compounding it. His contradictions, his reversals, his own words unraveling earlier claims. To insiders, he looks overwhelmed, stuck between loyalty and consequence, between supporting his wife and confronting the damage. And that tension, it shows. Body language experts aren't needed anymore. Viewers can feel it. Two people speaking unity while radiating disconnection. Two narratives running parallel but never quite aligning. Even their messaging around privacy has collapsed under scrutiny. Lectures about protection followed by selective exposure. Complaints about intrusion paired with strategic visibility. The contradiction has become impossible to ignore. That's why public sympathy hasn't materialized this time. There's no Diana moment here. No tragic silence, no collective gasp of protection. Instead, there's skepticism and something colder. Fatigue. Royal watchers say this is the danger zone. The moment where fascination turns to dismissal. Where headlines still come, but respect does not. Where relevance exists only as spectacle. And that's a brutal place for someone whose entire rise depended on being taken seriously. Because once the audience decides you're performing at them instead of speaking to them, every gesture is suspect. Every tear questioned. Every word weighed not for truth, but for strategy. Insiders say Meghan's greatest strength, her control, has become her greatest liability. Control reads as calculation. Precision reads as manipulation. And confidence now reads as entitlement. The irony is painful. The very tools that built her ascent are now accelerating the decline. And still, there's no clean exit. No apology would land cleanly. No interview would be trusted. No comeback would be taken at face value. That's the trap of over-curation. Once the audience believes the story is assembled, they stop believing any version of it. So, Montecito simmers. Hollywood distances. The palace stays silent. And the public? The public waits. Not with anger, not with loyalty, but with popcorn curiosity. Because this is no longer a redemption arc. It's a case study. A slow, uncomfortable unraveling of a modern myth watched in real time by millions who once believed it completely. The question now isn't whether Meghan Markle can reclaim the narrative, it's whether the narrative itself has finally slipped beyond her reach. And judging by the silence, the snickers, the closed doors, and the widening gap between image and reality, the answer may already be playing out, quietly, relentlessly, in front of everyone. And that's the most brutal part of all. The unraveling isn't explosive anymore. It's slow, clinical, almost polite. The kind of collapse that doesn't trend for one dramatic night, but lingers like a bad smell no amount of rebranding can mask. Insiders say Meghan still believes there's a master move left. One perfectly timed appearance, one emotional reframing, one truth powerful enough to reset the board. But the board has changed. The audience isn't seated where it used to be. They're no longer leaning forward, eager to be convinced. They're leaning back, arms crossed, watching for inconsistencies. And Hollywood has always been ruthless, but it's especially unforgiving to people it deems difficult. Talent can excuse ego, box office can excuse chaos, but when projects stall and goodwill evaporates, there's nothing left to protect you. Titles don't help, sympathy doesn't sell, and controversy without credibility is just noise. That's why advisors are reportedly nervous. Every move now risks reinforcing the very narrative they're desperate to escape. Speak out and you look defensive. Stay silent and the silence confirms suspicion. Smile too much and it's performative. Show frustration and it's proof of ego. It's a maze with no clean exit. Harry, according to whispers, feels it too. The isolation. The sense that bridges weren't just burned, they were detonated. Family ties strained, institutional support gone, Hollywood patience thinning, and no clear identity to replace what was lost. Prince, rebel, activist, producer, victim. None of it fully sticks anymore. So what remains is tension between ambition and consequence, between control and chaos, between the woman Meghan believes herself to be and the one the public now sees. And that gap is where careers quietly disappear. Not with booze, not with outrage, but with indifference, eye roll roles and a collective turning away. For someone who once commanded every room she entered, that may be the harshest reckoning of all. Reckoning of all. Reckoning of all. Reckoning of all.